Now, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But you can put salt in his oats the night before. So when you are trying to get your students to follow through on certain things, like doing homework, how do you salt the oats? Do you start the homework under your guiding eye and get it going? Did you have it written up plainly on the board? Did you, as part of your closing procedure, have students take out a calendar and write down what the assignment was? Many things we can do to salt the oats. Can't guarantee the horse will drink, but makes it much more likely. Oh, you know this one. You do not give grades. Students earn grades. Story of a teacher friend of mine who went from a suburban school to an inner city school. An English teacher, middle school English teacher. And she continued teaching the way she had been teaching. And the first 6 weeks, 55% of her students earned a D or an F. And the students were coming up to her saying, Miss Boucher, why don't you like me? Miss Boucher, why'd you give me a bad grade? Miss Boucher, why are you so mean? And she says, Jackie said as she listened, she realized those students really had no idea why those grades were on their cards. She went back and she made a self-checklist. And on it, she put statements for students to self-evaluate. The first statement was, I come to class. Always, most of the time, sometimes, once in a while, and never. I write my assignment down in a special place. I ask questions when I do not understand. I have a special quiet place at home to study. That's interesting. Jackie put together about a dozen statements of things she believed would help lead students to success in her classroom. One, I keep my English folder in good order. Then she ran off copies, got the half the class working that had been doing that made a decent grade, called the other half up, gave this out and had them go through and evaluate. And at the bottom, one thing I will do differently this next 6 weeks is. And the next 6, said she didn't do anything any differently. The next 6 weeks, 35% of her students made D's and F's. She cranked off more copies of that same thing, put the 2/3 to work, called the 1/3 up, went over it again. The next 6 weeks, 12% of her students had D's and F's. And Jackie said to herself, well, I don't need this anymore, we're done. And the students were coming up to her. Miss Boucher, where's that checklist that you had us mark? Miss Boucher, where's that check sheet? And she said, well, honey, you don't need one. You made a good grade. Yes, ma'am, and I want to mark the good side. So Jackie realized she had come up with an instrument that helped make visible her invisible expectations, remember that? And helped students self-monitor. Now, the original handout she had given was entitled, Why I Made a Bad Grade. She did a new one, and she entitled it, Why I Earned the Grade on My Card, and continued using it. I would submit to you, we don't have to wait until students make a bad grade. My suggestion is create something, title it, How to Predict a Grade I Might Earn. And on there, put about a dozen things that will lead to success in your classroom. And teach students to go through and make a commitment of one thing at the end. So there is a target thing on which to work. All a true false tells you is, who's lucky there? My test and measurements professor, Western Kentucky University, came in one day. He said, pop quiz, take out a sheet of paper. We did. Number from 1 to 10, we did. He said, begin. We said, sir, where are the questions? He said, I'm the teacher, I have the questions, you're supposed to have the answers. True, false test. True, false test, begin. And so we did true, false, just made it up. We then graded our papers. 2 people made 100. 1 person made a 0. We basically had a bell curve. And he then said to us, I've just proven to you the validity of true-false testing. It basically tells us who we want to buy our lottery tickets for us today. Never take student misbehavior personally. There's a cartoon I saw once that I wish I had. It shows a man at the office and the boss is yelling at him. He goes home and he yells at his wife. And his wife yells at the oldest kid. Oldest kid yells at the middle kid. The middle kid yells at the baby. And the baby kicks the teddy bear. Folks, some days we're the teddy bear. Something spills over onto us that really has nothing to do with us at all. Don't take it personally. It's not personal. And never assume deliberate ill will if something could be explained by ignorance or stupidity. This is sometimes very helpful at parent conferences. And then along with that, the difference between ignorance and stupidity. Ignorance is fixable. Not a thing in the world wrong with being ignorant. It just means there's something I don't yet know. There's nothing more unequal than treating every student exactly the same. They're not all the same. If I need an appendectomy and you need a tonsillectomy, we both have the same surgeon. I hope he doesn't decide to treat us equally and take out something that's a compromise somewhere in the middle. You teach students more about what you do. Your actions speak so loudly I can't hear a word you say. And folks, sometimes it's hard to come with a positive attitude. Sometimes there's stuff in our lives that's hurting us. I went through a time of life like that, and I knew what I didn't want to do. I had a teacher friend who'd been one of the best teachers I'd ever known. I would have fought to get my child in her class until she went through a very bitter divorce, and then she became very bitter, and it spilled out all over her students. So, if this is helpful to you, I would imagine, when I was going through a lot of tough stuff, I would imagine it as a jacket I was wearing. And I would stand outside my classroom door before I entered, pantomime unbuttoning it, taking it off, and dropping it outside the door before I ever walked in. So I could bring to my students only the best of me that I had to offer, and not the garbage that was working on my life outside of the classroom. It worked. Did you know you can be in two places at the same time? You really can. If you divide your verbal and your proximal attention. Typically, even when we are walking around the classroom, the person by whom we are standing is the one with whom we choose to verbally interact. Now, this table and this area has all of my proximal attention right now. But if I begin talking with Kim in the back corner, the research shows that the attention influence is now on this group over here and on everybody who's in a straight line from where I am to where the verbal attention is. When I learned about this, I tried to train myself. It was very difficult, but I encourage you to try it. Try standing in one corner while you're talking to a student in the other corner and see what happens. You can be in two places at the same time. Number 30, if you set the stage for misbehavior, don't be surprised when the students play the play. Set stage, room arrangement. If desks are crowded and you cannot physically get to every student, By the way, research shows us that males, adolescent males, when they are crowded, become belligerent. Adolescent females become paranoid. Setting the stage. Part of the way is how you do that physically. The other way is how you teach your rules and your procedures up front at the beginning of the year. But if things have not been made very clear, don't be surprised. If the opportunity for misbehavior is there, they will take it and run with it. My worst times when I would set the stage for student misbehavior, I tell on myself, I'm the best bad example I know. I misplace things. Don't I, Millie? She's laughing. Done it for years. And I'd be ready to hand out something and I couldn't find the handout. You ever been there? And while I'm searching frantically trying to find what I did with them, the kids begin doing their own thing. Yeah. So, think of how you can set the stage so that those opportunities for misbehavior don't occur. Think of what the typical things are. I recognize it's when I'm getting ready to get materials. So then I began to set up a station with things organized. And then I figured out color coding would help. Oh, I love color coding. And then all kinds of things to help me stay. Then I figured out too, you know, I don't have this one in here, Kim. Never do for yourself that which, oh, come on. Your students can do for you, absolutely.